When news of Absalom's rebellion reached David's ears, Joab and other soldiers climbed the defense castle. But David decided that he could not cause harm to the people by wielding a sword in the capital.
In the process of crossing the Jordan River, David went through a tragic journey, including the news that Mephibosheth remained in Jerusalem and colluded with Absalom to regain the kingship of Israel and was insulted by Shimei, a descendant of the former King Saul.
Thanks to this, Absalom occupied Jerusalem without causing any damage.
In the process, Absalom's soldiers committed atrocities, such as raping the royal concubines David had left in the royal palace in broad daylight in front of the people.
Shortly after the capture of Jerusalem, Ahithophel advised that before David regained his power, Absalom would send a small and elite pursuit of soldiers to enter David's stronghold and do a night raid to kill David.
But Absalom summoned Hushai the Harki, one of David's advisors, and asked him for advice. Hushai told Absalom that although they were fleeing enemies, the warriors who were still under his command were holding out, so they should gather more troops and fight properly.
Absalom accepted the Hushai's advice between Ahithophel and Hushai. However, there was one thing that Absalom had overlooked. This Hushai was the person who welcomed and greeted Absalom when he arrived in Jerusalem.
But in fact, before David escaped from Jerusalem, Hushai had been a spy of David's who had been planted to remain in Jerusalem and interfered with Absalom's operations. In other words, Absalom listened to David's spy and made a mistake of hesitating to pursue David.
David's men were more accustomed to other battles, such as plains and guerrilla warfare, than battle in the city. And even though the soldiers David brought out were the elite troops of Joab and Abishai, they did not have time to rearrange themselves so quickly.
So, if Ahithophel's words were followed, David might have been pushed into a corner. In the end, as Hushai's tactics allowed David to adjust his forces, Ahithophel sensed Absalom's defeat and returned to his hometown, thinking everything is ruined, tidying up the surroundings, and hanging himself.
In fact, it seems obvious from common sense that Ahithophel's operation was better than Hushai's operation. Absalom carried out a preemptive attack very successfully and occupied Jerusalem in a single stroke. And David was still on the run without establishing a base.
In many ways, it was a shortcut to success by forming only a small and fast pursuit force, arresting the king and quickly revolting, taking the captured king hostage, and subjugating the provinces that had not yet been subjugated.
Rather, according to Hushai's words, if he took time to gather the army in the area and fight, it would give David time to flee to the area where people were still loyal to him, recover his power, and fight back. The Bible describes that Absalom devised Hushai's plan, not Ahithophel, because God did not accept the good tactics of Ahithophel to destroy Absalom.
When the strategy was adopted, Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar to cross the Jordan River, and Jonathan and Ahimaaz quickly went to David and delivered the information, which allowed David to cross the Jordan River and escape Absalom's grasp.
After crossing the Jordan River and arriving at Mahanaim, David began to form punitive forces around Joab. As if responding to this, armies from all the tribes of Israel began to join one after another to rescue David.
When the defeat of the rebel army was finally completed, David gave commands to Joab, Abishai, and Ittai and issued an order to subjugate the rebels.
In the meantime, David declared that he would take the lead in subjugating the rebels, requesting that Absalom be generous with him, but decided to remain behind as the soldiers dissuaded him. Soon Absalom's rebels fought David's army in the bushes of Ephraim.
However, their defeat was the Absalom's army dealing with none other than King David's right-hand man, Joab, Israel's greatest commander and warriors, who had gone through all sorts of hardships with David for many years.
Moreover, although the setting is the bush, it was actually a swampy area. Even though Absalom had a definite numerical advantage, facing David's elite soldiers, who were overwhelmingly experienced in warfare, was like smashing a rock with an egg.
The result was a disastrous defeat for Absalom, with as many as 20,000 people being slaughtered, and more dead by drowning in the swamp than struck down with swords. Observing this, Absalom became terrified for his life and started to escape on a mule, but ironically, the long hair he had boasted about was caught on a branch of an oak tree, so the mule escaped and Absalom hung from the tree.
One of David's soldiers witnessed this scene and reported it to Joab. Before going into battle, David earnestly requested his men not to kill Absalom for the love of his family, even though Absalom had rebelled and even touched his royal concubine.
However, Joab decided that there would be future troubles if he kept the leader of the rebels alive. So he rebuked the soldier who reported this, saying, "If you had killed him, you would have received a big reward, so why didn't you kill him?"
Then, with 3 javelins in his hand, he went and stabbed Absalom in the heart. And he and 10 men surrounded Absalom and beat him to death. After killing Absalom, Joab dug a large hole in the middle of the bush and threw the corpse into it. However, seeing this, the rebels were discouraged and all fled. Sodok's son Ahimaaz told Joab that he would tell King David the good news of his victory. But Joab said it was not good news because the prince had died. So he called an Ethiopian man and had him send a message to David.
When the watchman said that Ahimaaz was coming, King David said that he was a good man and would come with the good news. After saluting, Ahimaaz blessed King David by delivering the news of victory to King David.
When the king asked about news of Absalom, Ahimaaz replied that he did not know what had happened. The king ordered him to leave, and Ahimaaz withdrew. After that, the Ethiopian who came in, like Ahimaaz, delivered news of the victories. And King David inquired whether he knew about Absalom's situation.
The Ethiopian said that the king's enemies and those who had risen up to harm him were all dead. Upon hearing this, David went up to the tower above the city gate, visible to all the soldiers, and mourned Absalom's death and wailed bitterly. Joab went to David and all the people who had fought for the king and suggested that if the king mourned by calling the name of the rebel leader, the people who had won the battle would have a difficult time in their position, and recommended that he comfort the people of Israel.
David followed Joab's advice to praise the soldiers who had contributed to the subjugation of the rebels, and made a conciliatory gesture forgiving those who had once joined the rebels. However, the problem was that Joab, who made the biggest contribution, was stripped of his position as commander of the army and replaced by Amasa, who had been the commander of Absalom's army.
At the same time as David reprimanded Joab for violating his orders, he began to check his power, which had grown too great. There was also a plan to win the hearts of all the tribes of Judah by employing Amasa.
In any case, Absalom's rebellion ended with the death of Absalom, the rebel leader, and David's embracing and disposing of the rebels. Thank you for watching. The narrators were Emma, Jessica, Angela, and Tony.